Oh my God. If you were discussing the ending of the movie without discussing these scenes and how they inform the meaning of the final shots, you aren't actually discussing the ending of the movie, you're writing fan fiction. This is how you get Jarhead sequels. Do you want Jarhead sequels? Because this is how you get Jarhead sequels. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing. Hey, that's kind of messed up, right?
Love being a Marine. Hoorah!
The Iraq War was never popular, or rather, it was always a deeply polarized endeavor. It was transparently an illegitimate conflict rooted in corporate interests, evangelical millennialism, and just general warmongering. The sort of thing that had never happened today. As an illegitimate conflict, the supporters were really sensitive about the whole deal, like just really snowflakey. If you said anything bad about it, they'd have a meltdown, which made support of it a mandatory social performance. Everybody remembers Freedom Fries, but let's take a moment to appreciate Star-Spangled Ice Cream. The anti-woke Ben & Jerry's Star-Spangled Ice Cream charged a patriotic $76 for 4 quarts of flavors like Iraqi Road, Fightin' Marine Tough Cookies and Cream, Navy Battle Chip, and I Hate the French Vanilla.
Among a dozen randomly selected taste testers assembled by this reporter, one called the taste undistinguished, another cheap, like the little cups of ice cream in elementary school, the kind with wooden paddles.
Famously, the band formerly known as the Dixie Chicks had their career basically ended as a result of speaking out against it. The war, not the ice cream. And that was just 2 years before Jarhead came out.
I can't watch. And neither can you.
Okay, so there's these 2 producers, Philip J. Roth and Jeffrey Beach, and they're like capital P producers. They've each got 100, 120 producer credits. They've made a lot of movies. And as the story goes, they're sitting there in 2005 watching Jarhead, and they get super offended. So, like, how it depicts the Marine Corps, how it used George Bush's Operation Desert Storm as a setting to comment on George W. Bush's Iraq War, all that stuff. They get so offended that a couple years later they go out and buy the Jarhead intellectual property rights specifically to turn it into an Ooh Raw Respect the Troops franchise, to fix Jarhead. Now, before we can talk about a Jarhead sequel, we need to ask ourselves a question. What is a Jarhead? Jarhead is a 2005 film starring Jake Gyllenhaal, directed by Sam Mendes, and written by William Broyles Jr., adapting a 2003 memoir of the same name by Anthony Swofford. Swofford served in the Marine Corps as a scout sniper during the Persian Gulf War, and his memoir focuses heavily on the particular dissonance of that war, the way that the soldier mentality was drilled into them over and over and over, and yet the reality of their daily life was tedium. Jarhead the movie takes this strand and really pulls on it. A central focus of the movie is that the Marine Corps, the military culture and mindset, is inherently destructive, that war can and will destroy the lives of its participants, even if they never see combat. It is, in effect, pointing at the way that the military machine takes young men and trains them to be killers, cultures them to crave combat, makes killing a virtue, and it points at that and goes, hey, that's kind of messed up, right? Like, that's probably going to do some irreversible damage that they're going to bring home with them regardless of anything else that happens.
You want a brand, you gotta earn it.
Jarhead basically argues that the Marine Corps is a cult, that it uses intense peer pressure, acute stress, repetition, vocabulary control, and isolation as indoctrination techniques straight out of the playbook of any high control group.
This is my rifle.
This is my rifle.
In fact, not only does it do this, it openly lionizes that process, uses that process as a conscious pressure point, tells recruits that they need to be broken down and rebuilt, and places a tremendous amount of shame on the inability to endure that process. Not only that, it is able to do so by leveraging decades and decades of pop culture to instill the submission to that process as a virtue, to sell that mindset.
What the fuck are you even doing here? Sir! I got lost on the way to college, sir!
A flashlight was a moonbeam. A pen was an ink stick. A bed was a rack. A wall was a bulkhead. A shirt was a blouse. A tie was still a tie, and a belt a belt. But many other things would never be the same. That's Vietnam music, man. Can't we get our own fucking music?
Now, this isn't unique to the US military. It's almost certainly as old as professional soldiers themselves, and there's a certain logic to it in part. Deployment and combat are prolonged high-stress environments, so the number one factor a military wants to filter for is the ability to endure stress. But that logic becomes mythologized. It becomes an ancient tradition, an exclusive brotherhood of the warrior defined by purity rituals that ultimately amount to little more than bog-standard abuse.
How the fuck are you going to fire your rifle when grenades are going off in your face?
This process irrevocably damages the characters, and while stories about soldiers who can never quite truly return home are also very, very old, Jarhead leaves that completely unvarnished because the entire exercise was completely pointless. See, the standard narrative for a hero's journey war story about soldiers who are left changed forever is that the damage is simply a cost that was paid for something noble and righteous and philosophical.
Earn this.
That is wholly absent in Jarhead. There is no cause, the damage is in service of nothing, and the human lives broken by the process are simply discarded. Swafford is told and tells himself that without his rifle, he is nothing. But at the end of it all,
I never shot my rifle.
Troy, who is about to be discharged for an undisclosed criminal record, is so invested in the identity that the Corps imbues him with that he weeps with joy as the squad brands him. Even if the institution kicks him out, Troy will always be a Jarhead. It's in part their attempt at giving him belonging, but the damage is already done and he takes his own life anyway. When the boys return home from Kuwait, a Vietnam veteran jumps on their bus to congratulate them and commiserate, but it just makes everyone uncomfortable. He's a pathetic figure, damaged in ways that will never be fixed, still clinging to the mythology of a Corps that has clearly done him no good over a decade after it tossed him aside, and the boys see in him their future.
And he sees that whatever else he might do with his life, build a house, love a woman, change his son's diaper, he will always remain a Jarhead.
But this is in no way a celebration of the esprit de corps of belonging to a brotherhood of soldiers. It's bleak, it's cynical. The label Jarhead, a self-deprecating military nickname normally deployed with sardonic pride, is treated literally. The Marines have hollowed him out, rebuilt him, and left nothing else inside. Jarhead, as it turns out, pretty good movie. A lot of complicated themes. You could see how someone who really deeply absorbed the Marines into their identity might take offense to that, or even just someone really invested in the myth of it all, especially in a post-9/11 war on terror environment.
3, 2, 1, get out! On! Get down! Go! Crawl! On your belly!
Now, this is going to feel off topic, but I've wanted to talk about the standard for years, and now is as good a time as any. I want you to understand that we aren't making up a guy here, and that there is a certain kind of dude, the tactical operator, who sees himself in a certain way. The Standard is a 2020 documentary directed by Phil Wall and produced by Go Ruck Media. You probably haven't seen it, and that's okay. It isn't very good. It's a really good example of a counter-documentary, one where the clear intent of the piece, the things that people say and the messages that are conveyed by the filmic language, are completely at odds with the things that are actually shown. The Standard is ostensibly about the most hardcore of hardcore military tactical badassery training, the US Special Forces. GoRuck Selection is not only the toughest endurance event on the planet, it is also an attempt to bridge the military-civilian divide. Hosted by a group of Special Forces combat veterans, this 48-hour challenge is a condensed interpretation of the U.S. Army's 24-day assessment and selection. For the participants, the event is a chance to test their limits while paying tribute to those who serve. For the Special Forces cadre who lead the event, it's an opportunity to honor their roots and connect with civilians. Less than 2% of participants finished the first 18 iterations of the event. Will anyone in Class 019 meet the standard? So, the frame here is that the U.S. Special Forces has a standard that applicants are expected to perform to in order to be selected for placement in a Special Forces unit, and the GoRuck Selection is an endurance event meant to mimic this process. Now, the word standard calls to mind something like official, right? Something codified, something measured, something standardized. So the setup is like, this is the actual bar that Special Forces need to meet. It's right up there in the pitch. Will anyone meet the standard? But then you watch the actual documentary.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Feel sorry for yourself or have self-pity?
First off, just to get it out of the way because of how obvious it is, the standard is just an ad for GoRuck, a company that mostly makes tactical backpacks that have a reputation for being extremely durable but uncomfortable, poorly laid out, and heavy. The movie is broken into two parts, the known and the unknown. The known portion is the first 20-ish minutes of the doc, and it's explicitly the U.S. Army Physical Fitness Standard Exam. Participants must be able to do 55 push-ups in 2 minutes, 65 sit-ups in 2 minutes, run 5 miles in 40 minutes or less, and complete a 12-mile ruck in 3.5 hours, all in the same afternoon. By the way, a ruck is just a hike, but you've got a full kit on, or in this case, a GoRuck rucksack, mostly full of GoRuck slab weights to simulate being full of ammo or canned food or whatever. After this known portion, we move into the unknown portion, which will take up the remaining hour and 15 minutes of the movie. The unknown portion is, unlike the known portion, just vibes. Rancid vibes, but still vibes. It becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly that everything the organizers are having the participants do is just kinda improvisational. There's a schedule of sorts, and a lot of the stuff has technically been planned ahead of time, but that planning isn't exactly systematized. They come up with an activity and then just make everyone do it for an hour or so before moving on. There's no numbers, there's no goal, and additional goals are added and removed based purely on whether or not the cadre, that's the term for the ex-Special Forces dudes yelling at everyone, whether or not they like you. And they're actually pretty transparent about that, at least to the confessional camera.
We're basically saying, hey, you're doing really well. We'll build his ego up, because we're looking to create distance between 2A and 6'2". That's the methodology. So the creation of distance, it's the same reason why a lion picks on the slow zebra, why I pick on the fast one.
This is what I mean about it being a counter-documentary. They really want you to think that this is some actual standard that soldiers need to live up to, that there's something quantifiable in all this, but then the truth is they're just winging it. They're trying to stress everyone out, but they do so based on convenience and bias, and the amount of abuse you're subjected to relies heavily on if they like you or not.
You still have a place to find comfort, because that candidate over there is getting a lot of attention.
This event is about fucking winning. Right now, you're getting special attention because you are fucking losing.
They pick on contestants that they don't vibe with, the highest performers get easier tasks and longer breaks, and they make things harder on the fly purely because there's too many people left in the competition. They're an elite, exclusive event after all. They can't have a bunch of people passing. Eventually, it's accidentally revealed that all of this is just happening on Jason's land. Jason McCarthy, the event organizer, is a former Special Forces soldier with the U.S. Army, serving from 2003 to 2008, and he's also the founder and CEO of GoRuck, and most of this event is just happening in his backyard, and they haven't bothered to, set anything up for this. If I say military fitness endurance event, you maybe conjure in your mind the image of army obstacle courses, right? The climbing walls, the ropes, the mud pits, all that stuff. But there's none of that here. No one's timing anything, no one's keeping notes. There's a whole bit where they just kind of mess around with some logs that happened to be nearby. Like, they're not doing log drills because those are teamwork exercises, and this is 100% anti-teamwork, hyper-isolationist.
We're looking to create distance between 2A and 6-2.
So yeah, this isn't a log drill, this is just pushing around a log. There's a clip of the winner of a previous event where there's this whole sort of ceremony at the finish line. So they're standing in front of this giant American flag and his family is behind him with congratulatory signs, but the whole time someone's standing just off camera spraying him with a garden hose because this is just something someone made up on the fly. At one point, they just have them move a bunch of paving stones for Jason's gazebo from one spot to another. And the fact that the cadre, they're in pretty good shape. They all seem like dudes who hit the gym as a hobby, but none of them have ever actually completed their own course, and frankly, most of them wouldn't.
I don't want to show up for this, do you? Do you? Nobody does. Nobody wants to show. Blaine saw the POI, he goes, no thanks, I'm good.
There's kind of two things happening here at the same time. One is the admission that to what degree this does resemble actual military behavior and conditioning, that behavior and conditioning is cult initiation stuff.
Dominate the man in front of you.
And second, the cultural mythology of all of that as a good thing. Having this reedy dork yell at you for 2 days is good because it gives you a taste of the warrior spirit that he totally has.
I don't want to show up for this, do you?
Frankly, all of the cadre look like awful people who would be an absolute nightmare to have any kind of personal relationship with. People who have absorbed exactly the kind of damage Jarhead is talking about.
Trample the weak, hurdle the dead. Let's go.
Start winning!
And you can easily imagine how someone like Jason would be very, very upset about that. I have no proof of this, but I have to imagine Jason doesn't like Jarhead much at all. Jason is probably more of a Jarhead 2 kind of guy. Jarhead 2 Feel the Fire is a direct-to-video sequel released in 2014. This is where Philip J. Roth and Jeffrey Beach come into the picture. These guys have, no joke, over 100 movie credits as producers. These guys are regularly producing anywhere from 3 to 7 movies per year, mostly via Roth's production company, UFO International. While it lifts some aesthetic elements from Jarhead, like a framing voiceover, a few parallel lines, and the general style and vibe of title cards, it is otherwise different in every way. There are no returning characters and the story is wholly fictional. Like, as a reminder, Jarhead is based on Anthony Swofford's memoir, and Jake Gyllenhaal was playing Swofford, a real person. There's none of that here. The only thing that isn't made up is the country of Afghanistan. Though from the sheer number of last names in the credits ending with a V, I'm going to assume this was shot somewhere in Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria. The movie follows supply marines who run essential supplies through contested territory, and there is a really interesting Jarhead-esque movie in that premise. Supply marines have a job that is both extremely dangerous and extremely dreary. Like early in the movie, the team is driving through a gravel quarry when they spot some garbage on the road, which could be concealing an explosive. So they stop and phone it in and are instructed to wait for the bomb squad to arrive, and the team has to sit there for hours waiting for the experts to investigate this pile of trash. The Marines are simultaneously vulnerable, but also incredibly bored. There is a tension between the mundane and life-threatening elements of their job. And while having bomb specialists investigate isolated trash piles in the middle of the desert is arguably an example of reasonable suspicion, there are numerous examples of the Marines demonstrating unreasonable suspicion, typically rooted in racism.
We got moving at 12 o'clock. Donkey! Who's that? That's your boy? That's your boy?
He's just carrying water to his village.
I don't care about his village.
So this could have been a movie about paranoia inherent to Bush's war on terror, a movie about soldiers who are taught to treat every aspect of the Muslim world with suspicion and are then dropped into the middle of it, a movie that confronts Western war crimes in the Middle East and explores the ways in which those atrocities are the natural consequence of systemic practices. That is not Jarhead 2. The garbage pile has no thematic purpose, it's just that parked vehicles and people standing around waiting is a really inexpensive way to fill runtime. Where Jarhead was a simmering character portrait of people driven mad for no reason, victims of a machine, Jarhead 2 is a troop movie about troops doing very budget-conscious heroic troop stuff like driving through a gravel quarry, or standing next to their Humvees in a gravel quarry, or defusing bombs in a gravel quarry. It starts with a big ensemble of characters, but most of them are killed off about 1/3 of the way through the film, and the bulk of the movie is the significantly reduced cast doing a rip-from-the-headlines type story of escorting a Malala Yousafzai proxy to safety.
She's a keynote speaker at the United Nations International Summit on Human Rights. She's scheduled to be in New York in 36 hours. It's direct from Washington. She's the president's guest of honor.
But don't worry, they make it a point that the Marines are willing to die for her without knowing her identity, because darn it, that's the mission.
You ready to die for this chick? We don't know anything about her.
Anyway, there's a bunch of gunfights and a one of the good ones translator and a female Marine who is in every way, shape, and form just one of the boys because she's a lesbian.
If only I weren't married. And you weren't, so obviously a lesbian.
Well, I don't care what she looks like as long as she's got a hot face and a banging body. Ah!
Cringe. There's no other word for it. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing. There are several moments throughout the movie that could be straight out of an Asylum production.
My life's all the way over there, man. My life's all the way over there, man.
The sequel loses the edge of the first movie in a way that is both hard to describe, but extremely palpable. In the first movie, the character of Fowler comes across a dead Iraqi soldier, which he names Ahab the Arab, and objectifies just out of frame. His behavior is depraved, and it's explicitly said that his behavior is unacceptable.
The Army may pull this type of shit, but the Marines don't. When we get back, Fowler will be passing out shit paper.
Here in Jarhead 2, a character executes a wounded Taliban fighter in a vengeance killing that violates the Geneva Convention. While it's not depicted positively, it is treated as an appreciable response in the circumstances.
Hey, cowboy up, you hear me? Get back in the game, let's go.
Well, the Marines in Jarhead 1 are trained to yearn to kill and infused with a bloodlust that drives them mad, with Troy literally kicking and screaming on the ground for the opportunity to end a human life. Our protagonist here needs to get your standard issue "It's them or you" lecture about the need to kill.
Well, yesterday I never even fired my weapon at anybody.
They died today, and we lived. Today was a good day.
Jarhead 2 opens in an identical style to the first movie, and on the surface it sounds anti-war. The narration asks what the point is in soldiers fighting and dying in the desert.
He will go to the desert and fight and die. Why is he fighting? Why is he dying? What's the fucking point?
But at the end of the movie, the narration answers that question with just the most cliche junk possible.
So what's the fucking point? I guess the point is responsibility of duty, love of country, a way of life. Are we on the right side of this? These aren't our questions to ask.
Even the first movie's use of always being a jarhead as a symbol of trauma gets reframed to mean mourning the heroic sacrifices of our brothers.
And the Marines who killed and bled and died will always be jarheads.
Jarhead 2 pays lip service to the anti-war messaging of the first movie, but its criticism of the military and the military lifestyle are surface-level complaints, just banal pet peeves that people bond over because they all think it's funny and irritating that their boss wears really squeaky shoes or is always showing off his guitar that he can't play. It's trivial and shallow stuff.
Hot as hell, all the sand, goats everywhere.
Ugly chicks, ugly dudes.
So, while Jarhead 2 is not hardline propaganda, it does invert essentially every message from the first film. Its ultimate point is that the hardship and sacrifice are worth it, that there is a greater good to be served, and it is honorable to do so. In other words, it's an entirely generic contemporary war film.
All right, Marines. 6 militants have just stormed this raggedy-ass old embassy you see behind me.
Jarhead 3 The Siege is a 2016 direct-to-video sequel to Nothing. This isn't a sequel, and at this point we can officially consider Jarhead to be an anthology franchise. If Jarhead 1 was about men going mad in a desert for no reason, and Jarhead 2 was about soldiers doing cost-effective soldier stuff in a gravel quarry, Jarhead 3 is about a cowboy who blows up the bad guy by shooting a propane tank. It's very telling that in my note-taking for the Jarhead movies, each installment's notes got shorter and shorter. One might instinctively attribute that to simply getting tired, and I'll admit that I didn't control for that. This isn't terribly scientific. But where Jarhead has several pages of notes and observations, and we managed to squeeze some juice out of what Jarhead 2 wasn't, the most prominent note I made on Jarhead 3 is that there's no visible penis on screen. It seems like at some point in making these sequels, someone sat down with the job to break down Jarhead, really juice out the essence of it. And they came up with a short list consisting of troops, courier font, time of day titles, an on-screen penis. Jarhead 1 and 2 both had the courage to get the wang out, but in this, the third installment, they've all but completely winnowed away the original Jarhead. All that's left behind is a voiceover and some title cards. Jarhead has this really compelling voiceover. It's one of the defining bits of the movie because it lets you inside Swofford's head, where he can say things that are embarrassing or shameful, admit to feeling and thinking terrible things. And because we're in Swofford's mind, in his memories, Mendes uses this to create really compelling little bits and contrasts, like when the camera pulls back and closes the door on a number of memories, like visiting his sister in the hospital, making muffins with his mother, and having interesting breakfast conversations with Dad, because those memories don't actually exist. Jarhead 2 at least uses the narration to bookend the movie and monologue about hope.
And if we're lucky, somewhere in all the fighting and dying, we discover hope.
Jarhead 3 The Siege retains this voiceover for no real purpose beyond some vestigial brand identity and is ultimately a fully sincere embrace of military propaganda. It's also pretty stupid.
I was gonna be number one, kick some ass, show them how it's done. Then dust off with bigger fish to fry.
The budget has gotten even smaller. This is more or less a bottle movie where all the events take place inside one small building, a US embassy in an unspecified Middle Eastern country referred to only as the Kingdom, though it looks suspiciously like somewhere in Eastern Europe, possibly Bulgaria. The embassy gets attacked for reasons, and then the Marines shoot everyone and win. And then the voiceover comes in the same place where the original was like, I'll always be a Jarhead, derogatory. This one is like, sometimes you get so caught up in thinking about what you want to do that you don't see what you need to do, which is take a career promotion within the US Marine Corps.
Convincing ourselves of what we want to do, what we have to do, that sometimes we don't see what we're meant to do.
Staff Sergeant Albright.
Whatever shallow resistance was still present in Jarhead 2 is here fully replaced with an overt love of the Corps. That's the message of Jarhead 3. The Marine Corps is dope and cool, and the only reason to not join is because you're okay with being a second-rate loser.
I joined the Marines to be the best.
This is, to me, a particularly funny parallel with Swofford's reason for joining, which was, kinda a really pivotal moment in that movie.
Sir! I got lost on the way to college, sir!
Most reviews of this movie complain about the fact that B-movie big guy Scott Adkins doesn't get a fight scene, which is a true fact about this movie, and you might find that interesting, so there you go. He plays this guy, who is named Gunny Rains.
All you care about is yourself and trying to be some kind of goddamn rock star.
Gunny is the Marine Corps nickname for a gunnery sergeant. I do know that, but I'm allowed to find it funny. Didn't you hear? Comedy is legal again. But with the whole being the best thing, it sure seems like our protagonist arc is going to be learning to quell his ego, learn some patience, and be part of a team. Throughout the whole movie, his squad mates mockingly refer to him as a cowboy because of his recklessness.
You don't always have to be first, Albright.
Sometimes being a good Marine means coming in last.
But it swings the complete opposite. When Gunny Rains dies, spoiler alert for Jarhead 3 The Siege, the ambassador promotes our protagonist, the new guy, because he likes the same initiative the squad took issue with.
He was the only one of you who tried to do anything to stop them happening.
And so our protagonist spends the rest of the movie taking orders from no one, being the first man in, being the best, and at the end of the movie, the major says, "Hell of a job," and our hero gets Gunny's old job. Like Corporal Albright himself, the movie's politics are too eager. It loves the Marine Corps so much that it shoots past propaganda and into the realm of fantasy. Again, the villain of the movie is a super terrorist who Albright explodes by shooting a propane tank. Now that I think of it, the movie goes out of its way to tell us that the team are security guards who have never seen combat, but they're out here racking up kill counts we only see in video games.
I never shot my rifle.
Otherwise, this movie is boring and stupid and nothing of any note really happens except the hot data analysis lady who looks kinda like Dee from It's Always Sunny is actually CIA, so she's secretly really good with a gun.
I ain't gonna lie, man, that's hot.
Anyway, Semper Fi, I guess? Jarhead 4, a direct-to-video movie from 2019, drops the numbering in favor of box art that aggressively references video game box art. The movie is about a US-born fighter pilot named Ronan, who is the son of a senator and an Israeli citizen by law of return. He lives in a massive house with a huge pool and a hot wife, but then he goes off on a mission of some description in Assyrian airspace where he's shot down by an Iranian-controlled Shiite militia headed by a man known only as the Ghost. Now, it might seem like the field of sunflowers that he crash lands in is an odd choice, not really evocative of Syria, but fun fact, due to their tolerance for heat and general pest resistance, sunflowers are a popular crop for vegetable oil production globally, from Syria to Bulgaria. So, you know, props to the movie for not just playing to Western stereotypes about what Syria looks like by setting the whole thing in a gravel quarry. Most of the movie follows an international special forces squad who were in Israel as part of a training program and are sent to invade Syria to rescue Ronan, mostly because they happen to be pretty close by. And so a member of that squad, Taurus, shares protagonist duties and is actually who we start the movie with. That's a pretty loaded setup, but this movie, more than even the previous two, is basically a Call of Duty campaign. It's not a very coherently told story, mostly just a lot of scenes populated with a roster of unmemorable characters who do soldier things. At this point, the only vestige of Jarhead that remains is the use of Courier as a typeface. Funny enough, the movie is pretty inaccurate with the military stuff. Dress codes are all over the place, unbelievable things happen, chain of command doesn't really seem to exist, but spiritually, this is absolutely reverential to the nebulous concept of the warrior and the modern military aesthetic. If we're looking at all the stuff that Jason and his pals were yelling at the civilians to make them feel like soldiers, all the stuff about grabbing victory and picking on the weakest zebra because you want to know the guy beside you is a survivor, this is easily the most in line with that way of thinking.
I like hitting them both.
Despite the movie's emphasis on Israel and the villain being a militant anti-Zionist, the film doesn't even have the courtesy to give us any incendiary politics. It's just the usual lines about Israel's right to defend itself. America and Israel have a very complicated relationship, deeply entwined with politics, military, and money, and there's a whole philosophical angle where Jewish Zionists are trying to do a Lebensraum and Christian Zionists are trying to do the end of Evangelion and manufacture prophecy that they believe will herald the return of Jesus Christ, and Jarhead 4 is part of that soft power system that has led to and enabled an ongoing genocide, but it is not a particularly significant part in any way. As propaganda, it is tepid and insubstantial. We've already spent more effort explaining it than the movie spent doing it. This isn't Wolf Warrior 2, a movie where a starving African child sits at a table piled high with Chinese goods, flanked by a kindly Chinese soldier, and stares straight into the camera while eating fruit. Jarhead Law of Return is rather a generic troop movie that could be set basically anywhere that was willing to toss the production some tax credits. Jarhead 3 at least pretended to have an arc for its protagonist, but the characters in Jarhead 4 are entirely static. Nothing is learned, nobody changes, and nothing is even really gained. Jarhead 4 has ostensibly the exact same climax as Jarhead 2, with a mission to rescue a hostage, but while Jarhead 2 ratcheted up the stakes by putting their Malala Yousafzai proxy in the enemy stronghold, Jarhead 4 has them intercept the convoy so we can have a shootout in the middle of a dirt road. So the good guys win the gunfight, find the hostage, and the movie tries to convince us it's over. But we know it isn't over because the ghost hasn't been dealt with. So you know something is coming, but what you probably weren't expecting was for the ghost to snipe Torres dead and then walk away never to be seen again. And here's the final word on that.
What the fuck just happened?
Same. And then the credits roll to a sad cover of When Johnny Comes Marching Home, so I guess this was a movie about sacrifice or something.
We'll give them a hearty welcome then. Hurrah, hurrah.
So there's a pretty clear divide here, with Jarhead in one column and the other three movies in the other. It's not just a shift in budget, but a seeming wholesale flip of the underlying philosophy, from derogatory Jarhead to proud Jarhead. So who are the guys who did this? Who was so offended by Jake Gyllenhaal's performance that they just had to fix it?
Do you want Jarhead sequels? Because this is how you get Jarhead sequels.
Okay, so I lied to you, but maybe you already figured that out. The whole story about a couple producers seeing Jarhead and getting bent out of shape? Completely fictional. Didn't happen. We made it up. In fact, it's not even original. It's a folk story recycled from the 80s to try and explain how Rambo went from PTSD-addled drifter coming into lethal conflict with NIMBYs to relitigating Vietnam into an American victory and running guns for the Mujahideen. It's also not true with Rambo. It's a story that's literally never been true. So what's the actual story here? If you figured out it was a fib, the thing that tipped you off was probably the moment I said that Roth and Beach have 120 movie credits and we're making as many as 7 movies a year, because that's a number so absurd that it means one of two things. Either these guys are fake and I made them up, or these are not the kind of guys who care at all about what Jarhead did or didn't say, only what sells. If you scrutinize the movies from their filmography, the pattern becomes very obvious almost instantly. Python 2, Lake Placid 2, Boogeyman 3, The Grudge 3, Messengers 2, Wrong Turn 3, Lake Placid 3, Lake Placid The Final Chapter, Sniper Legacy, Sniper Ghost Shooter, Doom Annihilation. Oh, but it's not just sequels, it's also knockoffs like Python, Falcon Down, Post Impact, and the absolutely inexplicable Grendel, which was quickly and cheaply produced to siphon off of Zemeckis' animated Beowulf, which was itself a massive flop. I mean, it's gotta be that, right? The only other nearby option is the 2005 Canadian-Icelandic co-production Beowulf and Grendel starring Sarah Polley and Gerard Butler, which is this really slow-moving, naturalistic retelling of the myth without the supernatural elements, and it only made like $92,000 in theaters because it basically only ran the festival circuit, because it's a dreary Canadian art film and that's all this fake-ass imposter country can make. Sorry, where were we? Right, Post Impact starring Dean Cain. I actually have that one on DVD from back when Dean Cain was just a sad washout, not a sad racist washout. These movies, this strata of movie, you already know it and love it just from the generic ass titles, but if you're not familiar, I can sum it up in one clip.
This is really screwed up. I mean, to get killed for $7 an hour. This was everyone's first night on this job. This is bullshit.
Looks like everybody's last night.
That's cold, dude.
Now, hold on to your asses, because this next fact is going to make your asses, like, fall off or something. But would you believe me if I told you that Philip J. Roth just happens to have emigrated to Bulgaria? Would it shock you to learn that UFO International has a backlot in Bulgaria with a generic Middle Eastern town and an Afghan village that nevertheless can easily play as a medieval or Latin American village? No. No, of course you wouldn't. This is all so mundane that it's borderline offensive that I'd even pretend it's a surprise. The other party in all this is Universal 1440 Entertainment, which is just Universal's direct-to-video arm. Universal owns the rights to Jarhead. No one ever bought the rights just to turn it into pro-military propaganda. The hidden hand here is a guy named Glenn Ross, who was the general manager and executive vice president of Universal 1440 from 2005 up until his retirement in 2024. Glenn's whole job, which he was evidently quite good at, given that he held the job for 19 years at, Universal, was to find budget-conscious opportunities amongst Universal's existing holdings.
I mean, what we were designed to do was to build brands within the studio. So we look at the studio's IP, intellectual property rights, for films that were released theatrically anytime in the last 50 years, really, and see if there's anything there that we think we could do a sequel to or a prequel to.
The main strategy here, which was viable until shockingly recently, was a primary focus on direct media sales, which means DVDs and Blu-rays sold through budget-conscious retailers, which means Walmart. To the amazement of absolutely no one, there is no wacky story and no wild scheming. How you get Jarhead sequels is simply that there exists a machine to sell movies via physical discs that relies on making frictionless films that will appeal to a hypothetical median Walmart shopper in Ohio, and that hypothetical just happens to look a lot like this guy.
Why are you still here filling water up? Hurry up! Fill up water, fast. Move out, fast. Pack your shit up, fast.
The machine wasn't built to fix Jarhead because it doesn't need to be. This is just what the machine does.
Grab your fucking shit and go!
In talking about the thematic and structural similarities between the movies, there's a really, really good chance that not a single one of the sequels was even written to be a sequel, but was just a pre-existing script pulled from a massive pile because it checked the boxes of troops, Middle East, R-rated with a breakdown estimate under $5 million US. Hence, all the aesthetic similarities to Jarhead being extremely superficial things like titles. One last factor in all of this, in the 2010s with the rise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Netflix, the mid-budget movie all but disappeared as the studios went functionally all in on 4-quadrant blockbusters. A big part of how you get Jarhead sequels is that you just don't get Jarheads in the first place anymore. Outside a smattering of movies from known indie darling directors and smaller studios, the budgets for movies has aggressively polarized. Movies are either insanely expensive or extremely low budget. This shift happened very quickly, leading to a lot more of Universal's bottom line riding on Glenn's work at 1440, leading to Glenn pulling out literally anything they've got that can put something recognizable on a box. Everything's gotta be a franchise now, whether it makes sense or not. So yeah, maybe I won't be terribly surprised if in 2027, Paramount Famous Productions and UFO International release Annihilation 2 Absolution, starring the artist formerly known as Jojo Siwa, alongside a couple character actors you recognize but can't quite place, and the whole thing is a bottle episode set in a suspiciously Bulgarian part of Florida, or maybe at a 6,400 square foot Arctic facility that is surfaced with concrete to allow easy snow coverage. Just kidding, it'll be an AI slop fest starring literally no one.
Coming this fall, a movie literally no one asked for. A bunch of AI slop, sloshed together for your eyeballs.
Okay, no, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna do that. All right, I'll spare you. This was originally just a one-off gag about some slop I found on YouTube. But the longer I thought about it, the more I realized it was relevant because we're talking about machines, right? We're talking about this machine that just like creates propaganda by virtue of thoughtlessness, right? Like it's just trying to appeal to a hypothetical audience, and so it generates this military propaganda as a matter of, the frictionless path through culture. AI is going to calcify that. It's just going to endlessly regurgitate what already exists. Every movie from here to the heat death of the universe is just going to star the cast of The Force Awakens. So the way that this is going is we're going to get more and more propaganda that's just going to reinforce the hegemonic structures of our society. and it's just going to feed itself. All of the stuff that we've already made is just going to be the fuel to make even more of exactly the same stuff. That's just movies now. It's just how it's going to work forever. So anyway, I guess that's maybe a kind of grim, bleak way of looking at things. But I don't know. Maybe things aren't so hot right now. Maybe a video about propaganda and how it gets thoughtlessly produced. Maybe it doesn't need a chipper final note. Maybe it should just let the credits roll, and like, if you want to watch more folding ideas, here's some links.